Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, the regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me at the Nasdaq market site in Times Square is Jill Simkins, CEO of XST Capital Group, Stephen Piepgrass, partner at Troutman Pepper, and Howard Glaser, global head of government affairs and legislative counsel at Light & Wonder. We're here to discuss trends in iGaming, cybersecurity, and regulatory developments, and where the opportunity for growth is. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Welcome to Market Site. Such an interesting conversation. There's so many cross currents when you think about the iGaming space. Joel, let's start with you. Give us a brief introduction of where XST sits within it.
Yeah, great to be here. I've been around the gaming industry for 25 years, spent the first 17 years of my career as an equity research analyst covering the gaming industry at places like Credit Suisse and Macquarie. Was over at Truist Securities and Houlihan Lokey, building out and heading up the gaming practices there. Left Houlihan back in February, spun up my own independent investment banking platform, XST Capital Group, back in May. Our focus was really on the emerging and rapidly growing sports betting and online gaming, digital gaming industries, providing capital raising support, M&A services, and other strategy for the sector.
Yeah, so you've certainly seen it evolve over the past couple decades. And Stephen, tell us about the work you're doing at Troutman Pepper.
Sure. I lead our firm's regulatory investigations, strategy, and enforcement group. And my practice specifically focuses a good deal on gaming and covered a very wide range of gaming-related issues. iGaming is some of the newest that we're seeing, and working with clients in anywhere from the payment processing space to game manufacturers and distributors, and even some retail operations. So pretty wide-ranging experience in that area, and we follow all of the developments across the states as they're looking to regulate in this area.
Which is what makes it so interesting, because it's happening right now.
Yes.
We're in that moment. Howard, tell us about the work at Light & Wonder.
Yeah, so Light & Wonder is a leading provider of gaming content and technology to the casino industry, both the land-based and the digital side. We operate in 500 jurisdictions around the world, about $3 billion of revenue. If you've been to a casino or you've been online, you probably have played our game. The digital space is a growing area for us. Last quarter, we did $22 billion in wagers on our iGaming platform globally. And so, it's a focus for us, but the heart of the business is land-based. And the issue today is, how do these two worlds of land-based gaming and online gaming begin to work together?
And we're certainly going to get into that. Let's talk about some trends that you're seeing within the space, because as we just mentioned before, it is evolving in real time.
Yeah, I think the first thing to note is that the introduction of iGaming in the US is relatively recent. Legal iGaming didn't exist here 5 years ago. And due to a Supreme Court decision and some federal work, it's now legal. Only 7 states have adopted it, but in those 7 states, it's the most successful launch of a gaming product in history. You've got, at this point, we're on a run rate to be at $8 billion in gross gaming revenue from those 7 states. By contrast, sports betting, which gets a lot of attention, will probably be in the 11, 12, $13 billion range from 35 states. So the production of revenue from legal iGaming is very significant. We think there's a total addressable market in the US of about $48 billion, according to recent reports.
So, Stephen, why only 7 states? It sounds as if the revenue that comes in that the state does benefit off of. What are some of the challenges with adopting it further?
It does, and I think we will see the adoption of laws allowing this going forward in years to come, but progress is very slow. There is a lot of pushback from some of the folks in the market already who see this as potential challenge to their ability to really maximize their own revenues, pushing back against legalizing iGaming in other states. And then we've also, as we were talking about earlier, have challengers in the gray market space that are also coming in right now and really eating up large amounts of market share. And so it's a challenge, but as Howard said, it's extremely lucrative, and one where I think there's a tremendous opportunity as states start to legalize this across the country.
And Joel, the demographics are really interesting, which makes the space attractive.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the bottom line is consumers are voting with their wallets, and you really can't fight the tide of this digitization of the industry. I often boil this down when I'm talking to folks that are more novice in the sector and saying this is internet retail in the late 90s, early 2000s. People want convenience. Everybody has an iPhone or an Android device in their pocket. They don't necessarily want to drive down to Atlantic City or their local call it tired regional casino, and this is speaking to a different demographic beyond the Gen X like myself and up to baby boomers. They want convenience, they want to pull out their phone, they want the social interaction with their friends and colleagues in that Gen Z millennials. So this is targeting a bit of a different demographic.
So what happens to the land-based sports books? Is that going to eventually age itself out?
That's really kind of, traditional land-based sports books have been really sort of a lower margin product. I would say almost more of an amenity, even in Las Vegas.
But they are fun to go to and hang out.
They're fun,
a lot of fun.
Particularly during March Madness.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
And we see the online market is just a different experience than the land-based casino market. People want two different things from it. It's like going to a concert of Taylor Swift or listening to her streaming music online. You're going to do both, and you're going to enjoy both. They're different experiences. We see the same thing in online gaming. People continue to go and drive business toward land-based casinos once they have the digital product available to them as well.
Yeah, and we've discussed this before in terms of how the products are being developed in the space where they do mimic platforms that millennials and Gen Z have grown up with in terms of that community-based experience.
Yeah, when I'm talking to folks about their products, I'm often hearing about social media platforms, hearing about TikTok, I'm hearing about Robinhood. I think everybody's trying to integrate these types of haptic features, entertainment, community, socialization into the product.
Yeah, it certainly is. But let's talk about the integration of AI and machine learning within this space, expanding globally, using these emerging technologies to advance the industry. You do open up to, let's call it data privacy and cybersecurity issues as well.
Yes, I think AI holds so much promise, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. It can be used to keep people gaming for longer periods of time as it reads the way that a player is interacting with the particular app that they're playing on. It can be used to see whether someone is in danger of becoming a problem gamer after perhaps too long playing the game. So a lot of promise, but also a lot of risk. Obviously, this whole industry is very, very cash intensive, and somewhere where privacy is extraordinarily important. You don't want to know you don't want your neighbors to know how much you're betting on a particular game, and so that's something I think the companies in the industry are really focused on right now is cybersecurity, making sure that they are these apps that consumers are using. And the networks that they're running on are as secure as possible.
Right, but those are the ones that have framework around it. So Howard, when you think about these gray areas, right? If someone tells me that I know I'm going to an illegal site or an offshore site, that's incumbent on me.
Here's the thing,
right.
You will not know whether the site that you are on when you're on an online casino site is legal or not, because the products look very similar, the technology is similar, there's a great deal of marketing behind them. But there's also risk that you have on an unregulated site that you don't have on the regulated. Just to give you the sense of the scope of it, the American Gaming Association estimates that the illegal online market in the US, not including sports betting, just for casinos, exceeds $300 billion in wagers per year. That's a very significant amount. It presents challenges for the regulated industry, who are offering a product in a limited number of markets that hasn't been adopted yet by more states. So you end up having two markets in the US right now. One legal, regulated, provides consumer protections, is taxed and licensed. One unregulated with very similar products that present risk to consumers, money laundering risks, and are not taxed. So this is a major challenge for the industry today, is trying to deal with the unregulated market and the outright illegal market as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's parallels to, for example, with marijuana becoming legal, and when you have the unregulated and the regulated space, there's a lot of parallels here. I mean, even if you think about how AI is being leveraged to push games out by using that predictive technology, we've seen this happen with content moderation issues on social media platforms. There really are a lot of parallels here.
There are, and I think this is an area where regulators are really focused right now. Howard and some of the members of my team were down at an Attorney General conference just a couple weeks ago where we were talking about this exact issue and the ways that we can look at laws that are already on the books to really tackle the problem of folks operating in not just the gray market, but really the black market in this space, and protect consumers in doing so. And I think it presents a real opportunity for iGaming, as they're doing it the right way in so many ways. Now there are some who are in the gray area who are better than others, but this, I think, is an opportunity for those in the iGaming space to speak to regulators, talk to state AGs and others in this space about how do we get these laws passed elsewhere, expand the market, and push a lot of this black market stuff out.
Yeah, and Jill, we spoke about this before when
Yeah.
you were on a prior panel in terms of the iGaming industry itself and its responsibility, because they are developing games that look familiar to Roblox or that community experience. Is the industry being proactive about how they're approaching the sub-25 market?
Yeah, I think it's you can't put everybody in the same bucket. There's a big difference between the fully offshore, illegal, black market operations, crypto casinos, and then the folks that are sort of this gray or sort of more nebulous zone. And I think time will sort of prove that out. I mean, if you look at the history of gaming, Class 2 was probably considered dicey 20 plus years ago. Historical horse racing 10 years ago was dicey. These are all mainstream regulated products right now. But yeah, there are definitely people that take this very, very seriously. A number of the groups that we work with and advise, some of them have limits in terms of taking bets from under 21. You know, I was just registering for one of these apps. I'm not going to name which one on Monday. I live in New Jersey. It was geolocating me. It was looking at my driver's license. It was making sure I was, you know, who I was saying I was. So I think some folks take it more seriously than others. We'll obviously see how this plays out over the next couple of years.
Which is interesting because, like you, I was testing the waters a bit, and it is a lot of fun. But I would imagine in a regulated market such as that, if the content moderators, if you will, recognize a pattern of addictive behavior, they're able to put parameters on there.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because if you look at the daily fantasy sports space, whether it's Prize Picks or Better or Underdog, these are more household names to the consumers, particularly the next generation. They've actually worked with a number of sort of the reg tech companies to do the right things ethically, to be able to track people's play. We actually just featured a company called ID Pair, one of our own content pieces last week. We had a 60% plus read rate, which is fascinating because you usually think people don't get excited about regulatory technology. People really wanted to bone up and know what's going on, but they're working very closely with a number of the DFS companies to monitor consumers' behavior.
Yeah, Howard, you had mentioned before you operate in 500 different jurisdictions.
Yes.
What are some of the other trends that you see globally, ex-US?
So, you know, we've got the iGaming is a very big one in the US. There are some other jurisdictions where it's much more well developed, obviously in Europe. As well. Brazil is looking at adopting iGaming, although the political situation down there raises some questions about where we'll go. But we think that, look, the market is very healthy on the land-based side as well. We just reported earnings yesterday, 14 consecutive quarters of revenue growth, 9 consecutive quarters of double-digit revenue growth. We're listed here on the Nasdaq at LNW, I should mention.
Yep.
And so, you know, all of these different markets are channels for products that work with each other. Whether it's the digital market, the social gaming market, we have a company called SciPlay, or the online and land-based market. So there's a lot of interaction between these. The demographics are a little bit different for different customers, so you can funnel customers from one channel to the other, and this is the big challenge today for the industry.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, if there are frameworks that are in place that perhaps are more evolved than the U.S. market, and this is a very fundamental question to a lawyer, why can't the U.S. borrow some of that, or why can't we regulate to keep up with the market?
So we can look to other places. I mean, obviously, iGaming is much more well developed in Europe and in other places around the world. But the U.S. is unique as a federal system, where each state has its own laws on this, and really, in this area, federal law looks to the states. And so this is an area, you said it's just like this in so many other areas as well. This is the challenge of regulating cannabis, for example, right? In this particular area, the states have authority, and they're the ones who need to change their laws in order to allow this form, iGaming, that we're talking about today, to be adopted.
It makes it very complicated, though, I'll say, because in other jurisdictions where you have a national jurisdiction, you're dealing with one entity or a limited number. In the U.S., there are 44 states with legal gaming. So you're dealing with 44 regulators, 44 gaming commissions, 44 legislatures, which is one of the reasons why it's difficult to introduce new products. We lag the other entertainment fields. Netflix doesn't have to get a law passed or regulation to put a new show on the air. On the gaming side, every game has got to be approved, they've got to be tested, the fact of your entry into the market has to be approved. So it's a complicated situation. But I think the inevitability of moving to the digital market is a thing that we would all agree on. Is the customers want it, the technology is there, the content is there. It really is now just a regulatory and legal approval of moving into those markets.
Yeah, another parallel you want to draw here is the healthcare system, where you have multiple jurisdictions, multiple boards, multiple agencies involved.
A lot of layers.
A lot of layers. Jill, do you think part of the roadblock to adoption has to do with ethical considerations?
Yeah.
Do some states?
I think I've been on my soapbox before, but I think the industry is definitely recognizing that this period we had back in, call it 2019 through 2022, of just wild marketing, turning on the television all the time and seeing different commercials for the big sports betting companies. The industry has definitely dialed that back and rationalized that. So you are seeing, and I think that's why a lot of these stocks have responded well in the last year or two, is a more disciplined approach to customer acquisition, player retention, doing things responsibly, not running commercials at all hours of the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, another parallel you can draw here too. Think of all the new fintech apps as it relates to trading. You're basically gamifying the process of educating yourself in trading and offering different slices of shares and products and so forth. They're using that same premise of gamifying the experience, Howard.
Well,
look at
gamifying.
last week with Robinhood and Polymarkets and Kalshi. I mean, that's all anybody wanted to talk to me about. What do you think about the sports betting or the political election betting markets, which is very interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that's something that didn't exist here until really this past year.
Right.
Is talk about gamifying. What is the impact of gamifying elections, which from a very technical legal point of view, as the counsel over here knows, is not gambling, currently at least, maybe is, maybe isn't, but is an event contract, and which is a very strange legal place.
Right.
But when you strip it all away, people are gambling on the outcome of an election, and what does that mean? Is that what was anticipated when we moved to online gaming in the US?
And some might claim that skill is also involved, but I don't know about that.
You had mentioned something off camera about sweepstakes and why there's a challenge associated there.
Yes, so we had been talking a little bit about, and what I often say in this space is what's old is new.
Right.
Gaming, for historically, it's always required three things. You have to have prize, chance, and consideration. And for many years, folks have been trying to get around gaming laws by saying one of those three prongs of the historically what's unlawful gambling, eliminating that prong. The sweepstakes model, which is now something that some of these online casinos are using to argue that they're actually legal, attempts to get around one of those elements of the consideration prong of the traditional
meaning that
gambling
the player
test.
understands.
Correct. They have free entries,
Right.
therefore no consideration, therefore no gambling.
Right. It blows my mind, Howard, how many parallels you see here.
Well, and yet on this particular issue, just to stay with this sweepstakes, which you will hear a lot about from venture capital in the US now, and payment processors who are getting involved in it, every regulator that's looked at it in the US has determined it's illegal gambling because it's unlicensed. Only licensed entities can offer gambling. There's an opportunity to pay money for a chance to win money. That's gambling. So I think this is still very much a work in progress. Everybody wants innovation, want to see new markets, but you cannot have an illegal market and a legal market existing side by side and expect the legal market to thrive and investors to want to put their capital behind legal markets when illegal markets can operate freely.
Right.
And so that's something we're very focused on right now.
So Joel, in the last minute here, when you think about trends in 2025 and beyond, what are you going to be looking for? What are you thinking about the industry in general, or where you would think about directing investments?
Yeah, listen, I think a rising tide is going to continue to lift all boats here. Obviously, there's other hot button topics like sweepstakes out there. I often say it's not your father's Ed McMahon sweepstakes, but it's really hard to fight the innovation we're going to see in this space. I think you can either sort of beat them or join them. I wouldn't be surprised to see these companies acquire these businesses when the lines are a little more clear in terms of where they stand from a regulatory legal perspective. But this is an industry that is only going to continue to grow. You look at Europe and what they went through the last 20 years, this tide is going to continue.
All right, appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.